Why
You know
can't I
what?
see you?
Who?
John Mark?
I don't know.
Because
Everybody else
I don't
is-
want you to. All right. Hi, and welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic is going to be on monetary policy. We are not experts and do not claim to be, but we are interested in the subject, and we are going to explore some, hopefully some things that you haven't thought about before. So I have Jeremy, who's new to the show, and then, of course, Matt, recurring guest, and Paul. So I'll start off by saying why I picked this topic. This has been a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time and been putting it off because I really know exactly how to approach it. So I'm just going to set us up and then bring everybody in for some thoughts. I want to say about a year ago, when after Trump started, after the stimulus and everything, and I started hearing a lot of people saying, okay, it's fine. And then round after the election of Joe Biden, it seemed like everybody started changing their tune that, okay, all this giving money out, is just going to inflate the economy, and all this printing money is just going to, inflation. And then about a year later, well, a little less than a year, but roughly a year later, then we start actually seeing, inflation. And I start saying it's the supply chain and all that sort of stuff. And then it occurred to me to kind of go back and try to question some assumptions, question some things that I maybe have sort of long held thought, and look a little bit deeper. So this is me questioning some of those thoughts and getting some other thoughts from you guys. The first thing that I would like to start off with is just the principle of printing money and why it didn't explode the economy in 2008. It didn't seem like it exploded the economy until 2 years after, now. And we can jump into some supply side and Keynesian economics later. Like to kind of explore some of that. But we'll start. Matt, do you have any, unless everybody wants to jump in, but just pitch it to you first. Any thoughts on why we haven't seen that crazy inflation until this year, when we've been printing money like crazy for the last decade?
The most obvious answer would be that there's something that's sucking it up. So whenever you put something into the economy, whenever you put money into the economy, if it gets immediately sucked back up, then what happens is the actual supply of money doesn't really change much. And I think to some extent that happened when you have people getting rich exponentially faster, a small number of people, kind of sucking it up. And that's the one of many different answers for that question. I think it's very wide ranging, but that's a factor that people don't often account for, is how quickly that money comes right back out of the economy. Because if it goes into large stock shares and things like that, it really doesn't necessarily get utilized. It doesn't get spent, because the wealthiest people in the world are not spending even a quarter of what they're making, So it kind of gets sopped up by the sponge effect of having the super wealthy.
That reminds me, and you guys feel free to jump in if you have a response to that. But one thing that I recently saw or heard somebody say that the Fed has, I think, 12 banks, central banks that they send that money to. So basically they just say, okay, now you have more cash in your bank. And then that bank will say, okay, great, we have all this money this quarter. That's awesome. Everybody gets a bonus. We're going to invest this in these, different companies, all these, Coca-Cola, whatever, Amazon, blah, 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 on down. Those companies then say, you know what, our balance sheets look awesome. Let's everybody get on the board, gets a bonus. Let's how are we going to use this extra money? All right, we want to build a new factory. Okay, so we're going to build that Ohio, Mexico, China. Let's go with Mexico, and then those jobs go to Mexico, and that money doesn't never, but just hardly ever actually gets to jobs these days. It seems like the idea of that trickle down hits the effect of it hits a wall And it seemed like that happened a lot in 2008. That's what the claim was. And yeah, so Jeremy,
I
you're
just wondered a little bit about, so something about your question like needs to be defined. Has the U.S. economy been destroyed? Right. For certain people, it has not been destroyed, but I think for others, it kind of has been destroyed. I think that's one of the things, and it starts even way before like 2008. Like I'm old enough to remember getting a tax cut or tax break in the middle of the year in 04, and then in 06 they did it again, where George W. Bush sent tax refunds back to people mid-year, and that was the first time I'd ever heard the common phrase that's used now. It's like boosting aggregate demand began to be thrown around. And the idea was go, they even made speeches, go buy a television, go buy this type of thing. And so, but one of the things over time, and Matt touched on it, is like how people explain the wealth gap is really part of how 2008, or to be honest with you, it goes back way further. 87, they entered the market for the first time. 87, I got up one morning and went to school, and on I think it was Black Monday, 1987, I came home at 2:50 in the afternoon, and both my parents were at home. My mom and stepdad were at home. They worked for a company called ProMed. ProMed had been was owned by former HCA stockholders. They used their HCA stock as collateral. It collapsed that day. The bank called the loan, crushed the company, took everybody's jobs, sent everybody home. In 87, they created, like a plunge protection team where they actually enter the market on days when it's plunging to stop it. And they start buying, and they buy up. They, some of the days where we saw in 2018 and in 2012, and I would say probably recently too, were stopped by that like plunge protection team. But anyway, it goes like, the question is like, has the economy been destroyed? See, I would say the real economy is destroyed, that Main Street's destroyed, and that Wall Street still exists. And the way that they exist is they just buy their own stocks back, and they drove their own stocks up with that free money they could get, because cheap money, what the Fed does, cheap money causes people to do stupid things. Long money causes people to do good things. So instead of investing in infrastructure, they always go for the short-term gain, which is buy your own stock, drive your own price up, because all those CEOs are paid not by the hour or even on salary. Most of them are paid by bonus. Bonus is how they make big money.
quarterly.
So I'm talking too much, but I just thought that's a huge question. Like, is the economy exploded or not? For certain people, yes. For certain people, no. But for the people at the bottom who weren't owners, say in like 2000, since 2008 or 2009, like if you didn't get in when they drove interest rates down now, when they have to correct this bad boy and drive those interest rates up, everybody who does not own will be locked out of the market, and you will create a climate that will turn this entire country into a nation of renters, while BlackRock and Fidelity roll through here lapping up neighborhoods because they got the advantage. So anyway,
and that's one thing that's frustrating to me, is that we have we sort of created a house of cards, so to speak, and now the only way to get out of it seemingly is to keep it going. But Paul, you look like you're going to add something.
Yeah, a couple of things. When Bush did his retroactive tax cut, I had a very small house cleaning company, and I was doing all the cleaning, and my wife was doing some of it too. But I was waiting for my stimulus check. I called in. Oh, well, you're just a small business owner, and you filed as a sole proprietor. You didn't file as an LLC. You didn't file as a wage earner, a W-2 wage earner. So you're not getting anything. And I was all in favor of the retroactive tax cut. And then I saw what a manipulation it was. And from then on, for me, it's been, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to have this stimulus, that stimulus. And I just easily react with, oh, okay, you're lying to me again. And yeah, you've got your BlackRocks, you've got your Fidelities, you've had, but who's created that environment where they can enter into a marketplace, and everybody else that doesn't have that kind of funding is left out.
Yeah, I agree. A lot, that malinvestment, monkeying with interest rates, printing money, things like that cause malinvestment. A malinvestment causes a bunch of people to make decisions that they wouldn't otherwise make. Like, the poor, you give them money. So you're a business owner. So government really doesn't target you that much for aggregate demand. They're already stopping you both ways from Sundays, and they're not interested in giving you any money back. Plus, they would prefer everybody to be sort of, I don't know, to use a phrase I like to use is a wage slave. I talk to my children about not being a wage slave, because if you don't own anything, you don't own anything. And at the end, you're just short term in it. So they want everybody in that wage slave category because it's super easy to harvest taxes from them. And it's also super easy to manipulate them by thinking they're getting money back, whether they're loaning it to the government or whether the government's just bribing them into certain behaviors, which is, again, if you return to that 2004, 2006 IRS time. I mean, really what you were doing was exploiting the poor to go out and make purchases that they couldn't afford to make. And that sort of thing is what interest rates and bad monetary policy does. But that, you mentioned Keynes, but that was his point. In the end, you're all dead. Don't save, spend, spend, spend. That's his theory. His theory is don't create liquidity traps. Don't leave money in the bank. Don't save, savings for other people. You're not going to get to use it. So use your money now, and it goes right in with the American sort of mentality of instant pudding, popcorn, microwavable popcorn, immediate gratification. So that's why I think that particular philosophy is so ingrained here, but it's also so destructive here because we have yet to really feel those consequences that money printing will certainly bring. It's a good question, though. Is the economy destroyed? Is there a Main Street? Is there a Wall Street? Is there some economy between that? That's such an interesting question.
I'm pretty sure it's all.
I get so many different answers. I have another friend. I have a couple friends who are, what I would say are pretty wealthy guys, and one of them has a really hard time when I say we're going to turn this country into a nation of renters, like I made that statement, because, for him, and because this is how he did it, he just ate, like crackers and tin fish and buckled down and did it, and to him, the idea that there's people that are going to be locked out because of interest rates or things like this, he has this concept that it can be overcome. And what I keep trying to tell him is that, man, he's an anomaly among people. I mean, there's very few people I know of who, there's what you want to do, and then there's what you actually do. And most of us are like, I can't even get on screen how far my will and what I actually do is. But I do have a few friends who I would say live pretty much like this. Like if they tell you, hey, I'm about to start a business, you better get ready. Them guys are going to start a business. And 5 years from now, they'll be selling it to somebody, But then I have other friends who say, man, one day I'm going to start a business. And they're never going to start a business.
Yeah.
It's the way it is. So just trying to explain, to him that that's true, that what he's saying is true, but it won't be accomplished. And because of a bunch of barriers, that some of them are natural barriers to some people, work, intelligence and things like that. But some of them are discipline barriers. But then, the more barriers you erect before people, the less opportunity they're going to have to succeed. And, there was a time in this country where you didn't have to have 125 IQ to do well. You could roll out of your bed and go to an Ohio, mill and work a wrench like this all day long. Right. And it was your thing and you did it well and you could live, and the idea that these two worlds are opening up are very difficult for people who are on the 125 to 140 IQ of things, to grasp what's going on in somebody's life that doesn't have some of those natural advantages or didn't have parents at home or, didn't have multiple generations of things that, like inheritances and things like that. I mean, there are all kinds of things that go into helping us and forming us and being who we are. So.
Yeah, I actually I
Yeah, I
resonate a lot
actually
with that
I resonate a
because
lot with that
oh,
because
what happened to my audio here?
what happened to my
That
audio
happened to
here?
y'all?
That
The
happened to
audio
y'all?
is being routed somehow back.
Yeah, for some reason,
Is
Zoom
that
is
better?
not behaving for me.
Me either. I'm sorry, guys.
Paul,
So the
you
technical issues, but I resonate with that what you were saying, Jeremy, because I think anybody that even starts out on their career path in their 20s and then maybe they start getting rolling a little bit with it and start putting a little bit back savings, any kind of setback can set you back dramatically. I went through a divorce and, financially that set back, dramatically. And, and it having a period where I was single parent and having to provide everything, child care expenses, all those things back and forth, whatever, really was like a slap in the face. And I think I would be a little bit more myself even by looking at people around me going like, all you got to do is just, work a job and put back the money, buy a house at some point in your 20s and you'll be set by the time you're 35, 40, you'll be all good. And, but yeah, any hiccup along the way or any sort of late start, or, if you don't, aren't able to get, a decent job for several years, it can, you know, it's that opportunity cost, so to speak. You just get way, way, way behind. And yeah, and I think it's really hard for some people that I talk to, like you're saying, to understand that it's not just, the bootstrap, everybody can do it. Anybody can do it. You can't do it, you're lazy. That kind of, it's not as easy as it was. And that's one of the things that I've talked about a lot on this show is how, our parents, it was easier for a lot of them to get on, on sort of a normal trajectory. And even if you did have a hiccup, you had time to recover. And now
they had an honest market. You don't have an honest market. I mean, that's the real to me, the real difference. It's not so much that, like, when you say you had an easier way, of course everybody's got a story how they walked uphill, in the snow both ways, killed a bear with a loose leaf notebook and all that kind of thing. So to them, it doesn't, they didn't have an easy way. But I think what most people don't understand is that, like, I had a fairer market. I'm older than you, most probably all of you. I had a fairer market than you did. And one of the things trying to get my parents to understand for my kids, for my parents, both sides, but mainly my parents generally are convinced all my children should go to college. And some of my children don't want to go to college. And they're having a hard time with, because in their equation, 1 + 1 is 2, right? So you grow up, you get a high school degree, then you get a college degree, and then big bam boom, you retire with a 30-year watch and that kind of thing. So if you're like 70 years old, that was your life when you entered the market at 20, and they have no imagination that, John Mark, you probably changed jobs, more than me in your first 5 years in employment than probably I did in the first 15. Because employment used to be longer, it used to be permanent. It was, I mean, so the way the market has changed everything it's created a lot of imbalances, and there's some dishonesty in it that is very difficult to overcome. And if you entered the market when it was a fair market, it's hard for you to look at those people who are entering market in an unfair market, with weak money and low interest rates. My parents bought a house. Whenever somebody says we have a strong economy, I always come right back with this. My parents bought a house on a GI Bill. My dad spent 70 and 71 in Vietnam. He came home in 71. They used their GI Bill. They bought a house with a 10% interest rate and 20% down. And my father and mother were 21, 2, and 19.
Wow.
I don't know another 22-year-old and 19-year-old who could bear a 10% interest rate or put 20% down, even if they join the military right now. So whenever somebody tells me you have a strong economy, I always say, well, why can't we have honest interest rates then? Why can't we have actual down payments then? Because if you could do that, we'd be strong, because we can. That's what shows our real weakness.
Yeah.
And we would be strong as individuals, and those that are in power would not have the strength they do. And And so when we as individuals don't have that kind of spending power like Jeremy's parents did, then politicians will play around and jack around with money, and it keeps themselves in power and us further away from it. Can I, Jeremy, you don't have to answer this question, but can I ask how old you are? I'm 46.
Yeah, I'm 49.
Okay.
49. Yeah. You're more preserved than I am. I got a lot of gray, gives it away. I couldn't guess your age on the screen. So.
Oh, if I let this grow out, yeah, it'll be it's a decent salt pepper mix.
I knew you probably were approaching 40 if you owned a business in early 2000s and could recall George W. Bush's presidency at any detail at all, you know.
So
the only thing I remember about George Bush was the 2011, my birthday. You know, the Twin Towers came down. That was a tragedy. and then I do remember it was 2006 that you said that the economy, we got that stimulus, that $500 or something. Was it? Yeah, I remember getting that. Like the first year I was working at Quiznos or something, and remember it kind of just going straight over my head. Like, oh, $500, great, cool, awesome. You know, like an extra paycheck for me.
Yeah, I'm such a political animal that I've been watching American politics since Reagan was shot. I remember being plopped down in front of the TV in my house and watching news coverage all day.
I'm the same way. I actually would have been about 4 when Carter was defeated and Reagan won. So I couldn't see. I would have been 72. Reagan 76 when Carter won. So I was 80. So I remember when Carter won the election, because I remember he was a Southern Georgia peanut farmer, and it was the whole like thing. And I thought it was really cool that we'd have a Georgia like peanut farmer as a president as a little kid.
Yeah,
that was great. Like 4 years later, though, I don't think I thought it was great anymore. Even though, and I legitimately did pay attention like 8 years old. I debated Reagan's second term. He ran against Mondale Ferraro, and Geraldine Ferraro was like the first woman to be nominated for something. And they put me on stage with another girl to debate in like middle school. And like she showed up with like girl power, and I showed up and was like, yeah, but what's her tax policy? You know, can you let's talk about how she feels about welfare reform. And that little girl was just like deer in the headlights. She had no idea that anybody was going to show up like that.
What you're telling me is you got destroyed.
What's that?
What you're telling me is you got destroyed.
Yeah, I was less than. I used to tell people up until I was about 32. I used to tell people I was a jerk for Jesus, mainly from like 22 to 32. Before 22, I was just a jerk. You know.
Yeah.
So,
I do remember I remember watching the returns of that election, and just everything went Reagan. Mondale got 2 states, and neither one of them was his own home state.
Did he not win? I thought he won Minnesota. That was it.
He did. Okay, yeah. And for people who ever since, everybody that says we have a mandate, Reagan had a mandate his second term, or he just had a terrible opponent.
True mandate. He had a terrible opponent and a mandate.
Yeah.
But that kind of brings us back to Harris. Yeah, that kind of brings us back to monetary policy, though, because we're looking at sort of a trap at exactly the same thing: stagflation. You're seeing oil prices go up. You're seeing, logistics issues. We all live. This was all the early 70s. I sat in my dad's like Chrysler Satellite with those big slick tires on them, waiting in line at Texaco. I don't even know if they still have those places, Texaco, to get oil and stuff. Exact same thing. And to me, you're going to have sort of the exact same play. Has to go, like somebody has to grow some, have some guts and be Paul Volcker right now and let interest rates run. Just run them. Just let them run. Because if you don't let them run, this is going to get real bad, because you've got to destroy those extra dollars. And the only way you can destroy those extra dollars is 2 ways: defaults or savings. So they're either going to pull them out of the economy and save them, or you're going to have people default on loans and have to resell them back into the market. So, I don't know how you stop inflation any other way. If somebody else has got a better idea, to me, Paul Volcker showed the way, and it's been the only way that we've ever had to deal
Yeah.
with inflation. I gotta put my in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to steer it back to that with Reagan and everything. And one thing that you said earlier that I really wanted to bring back into the conversation again, Keynes was talking about spending, the government spending to generate the economic growth. And it seems like the supply side of the equation tends to be cut government or cut taxes on corporations and let them do the spending. And so, in to tie all these kind of threads together, is that a path? I know you said raising interest rates and letting getting popping the bubble, so to speak, is what it kind of how I'm interpreting that.
Sure.
Is if we let the bubble pop, what do we cut taxes again? What is the impetus for bringing that spending back? Because both of them, to me, the real crux of it is your government is spending and it's getting economic growth, or taxpayers are spending and they're generating growth. But either way, it's that aggregate demand, it's the spending in the economy.
Of course, my position that government doesn't ever stimulate any growth. It just destroys it by redirecting funds in wrong ways. Like they eat up 90 cents of every dollar in bureaucracy. So, I mean, I don't see any path forward here. Frankly, I mean, I'm kind of a guy who says that the only path forward will be eventually that there. I mean, you'll know the jig is up. That I generally tell all my friends is the jig is up, and you will know it. And the day you'll know it is when the first one of those guys waddles up to a microphone, and I mean somebody with authority, waddles up to a microphone and makes a legitimate and tells everybody legitimately that they're about to cut the size of government in some way. Because up until now, they never had to do that. They could print their way out of it. But I think that you're coming to the end of being able to do that kind of thing. I mean, they may try it again. I mean, they're crazy. I don't know. If I never have any doubt for the kind of like mendacious, like terrible things they'll do. But eventually somebody's going to waddle up and say they got to cut government. And when they do that, you'll know that the reserve currency's shifted, that there's been some changes in the way the monetary system work in the world, and that monetary change is going to restrict the government's ability just to introduce endless treasuries onto the bond market and then do that carry trade thing where they just manipulate central banks around buying each other's bonds to keep this thing going. So that's what I think. I think you're going to actually eventually see, by necessity, legitimate cuts in government. Like they're going to have to reduce rates of spending, because I just don't think you can raise taxes. You have 50% of the United States doesn't even pay taxes. And you can raise taxes on billionaires, but that's only going to last for like a second. Well, that's a one-time kind of thing. Once you wipe that income out, you're still not going to be able to fix the problem. And I think that there's a few people already kind of see it coming, and I don't see any way around it. So I hate to be a doom and gloomer, but higher interest rates, cuts and reduction in spending, difficulties. To me, the only question is, do we face this for our children and buckle down and tighten our belt and do it ourselves, or do we like cowards and turn it away and keep pushing it down the road and crush our grandchildren or children with it? To me, that's the real question the American population has to answer. Do we have any courage left in us? Do we have any manhood left in us? Do we have any of the old spirit of the republic, or are we just content to go the route of Europeans until we become, nation states who probably won't even be there in 30 years because of demographic displacement and not having children, and because these destructive policies have been going on since the Roman Empire over there. You can just see their slow destruction of everything. I'm talking too much. Sorry.
No, you're
so
fine.
I want to pick up on the spending and cutting taxes. So the mantra in the 80s and 90s in conservative spaces on talk radio and stuff, it was, oh, your mic's off, Jeremy.
You did that on purpose.
Okay.
I didn't want to steal your thunder. I was I'm figuring out what you're about to say.
Okay. So the mantra was cut taxes and that'll stimulate the economy. But we're past the point where simply cutting taxes is going to do it. We now, and for a while, I'm not sure how far back, but at least the last 10 years, maybe longer, if you're going to fix the economy, you cut taxes and you kill spending. And there's plenty of great places to do that. I'm thinking, $1,500 hammers that the Pentagon buys. But we can't just cut taxes anymore. And we haven't been able to just cut taxes for a while. It's got to go with deep spending cuts. And Jeremy's right. Are we going to take the hit ourselves, or are we going to kick the can down the road like we've been doing for the last 60, 70 years, and let our kids or grandkids or great grandkids deal with it? And at that point, it's going to be astronomically worse.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, do you have anything to add before I play devil's advocate for a second?
Yeah, so there's a moral failing of our leadership to actually cut things that would pertain to them. It doesn't make any sense for our leaders to introduce cuts to spending on, say, defense or social welfare, so long as they're still insisting on tremendous amounts of money for themselves and insider trading and opportunities and things like that. As long as we're seeing our leaders getting wealthy off of the system, as long as we're seeing them get lobbyists wealthy off of the system, nobody will ever be sold on spending cuts. But that's really the only way to stabilize our economy. So the amount of money that's going into the economy versus the actual real adjusted power of the economy is really what causes inflation. Now, you can temporarily do measures to keep the inflation from going as steep as it would otherwise, but what's eventually going to happen is that's going to leak out. It's going to result in degradation of the prices, which is what inflation is. The prices go up as the value of the dollar goes down, more or less, and you end up taxing everybody. But it's also a tax that nobody has to vote on. The politicians don't vote to raise inflation. They vote to do X and X for such and such, to try to stimulate such and such. So it's really deceptive. People don't realize that what their leaders are voting on is a new inflation bill. So it's there has to be a change in our attitude towards spending money that we don't have, but knowing, of course, that we could always make more. It's going to tax us through inflation. And I think inflation, when you look at the way that inflation eats paychecks, inflation is really the big thing that has caused the average American to have much less opportunity. The average American has less possible spending money. It's going in more different directions. So that's what I would say about it, is that there has to be an attitude change, and it's going to have to be personal, but it's also going to have to be about our attitude towards increasing government spending. It's just got to stop. You can't say, more tax, therefore more spending. You have to just say, we need to cap spending until inflation is close to zero. So,
yeah, so real quick on that inflation versus, I think part of the reason, in my estimation, why people don't have as much money as they used to have is partly inflation, obviously, but it's also partly we have created a culture of debt, right? Rather than looking at owning things, we look about how much those payments are. So I can have more stuff. I can have a car, my iPhone on payment plans. I can have my car on payment plans. I can have this bigger house on a better neighborhood on payment plans. I can rent this here, whatever. And so that puts us further behind. You think you're getting ahead. You think you're getting a better car. You think you're getting a better house. You think you're getting all these better things in your house. Your life looks better on the whole, possibly on Instagram it looks better, but in reality, you are now you're paying interest to somebody else. You're also you have all this debt. Your net worth is being destroyed to a certain extent, with the exception of maybe the house. But yeah, so when you're talking about like inflation causing some of these problems as far as like the standard of living, I think it also has to do with our debt culture. And then also too, I wanted to play devil's advocate for a second on the spending thing, because I think the other side of the argument might be what the TVA, right, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the government put put a program here so that to build these dams across Tennessee, and created lots of jobs, and in effect lifted the half of the South out of um, poverty by, number one, jobs, number two, this is the argument, and then number two, having that electricity, more power plants, teaching techniques. The government workers actually came to these farmers who were farming on the sides of these hills, and they were having erosion, and they were teaching farming techniques on how to do it and be much more productive with their farming. And a lot of these farmers were able to get tractors when they were using old timey plows and stuff.
Mhm.
And those were grants from the government, so that actually allowed the farmer to produce more things and sell more, and so it sort of did lift everybody out. And so when I talk about spending, the economy spending to get people's situation better, that's the type of spending I think is actually good. But when you're talking about the Fed putting money into these 12 banks, and then those banks, investing in the stock market, and then those companies have all this extra cash, on their balance sheets that they're trying to reinvest or do some sort of, thing where they're going to hire, more workers for this, job, whatever, that a lot of times gets outsourced and those jobs don't actually get created. So it seems like the Fed is really, really ineffective at lifting people's situations, but the government actually could have some potential ability to do things like infrastructure, actual real infrastructure, giving here's a check, who wants it, who's going to build this road for this much money, oh, I want it, and then they're going to build that road or whatever. So I think that, to me, government spending, when you say it's bad, obviously I think that what we're doing with the Fed is awful. It's stupid, printing all this money, and most of those banks are not even spending it. The M2, whatever it was, most of that, this last stimulus, in the last, what was it? Sorry, was it 2020? Most of that's just sitting in a bank vault. It's not actually being spent into the economy, or even to the economy, to these wealthy people. And then when you invest in something like BlackRock, you're literally investing in them buying your neighbor's house, getting a little piece of mail, and I can sell my house today for no closing costs and all this blah blah blah, and then go rent somewhere else. And now effectively you're just giving up your whole neighborhood to being renting, and like you're saying, which I think is horrible for the long-term health of the country. So
I do think that there's a sense in which, like, you have to be careful when it veer into like a bald libertarianism sometimes, like, and I mean like libertinism more than libertarianism. Libertarianism like goes under so many, like, I get confused. I wrote for years under the moniker evangelical libertarian. Partially, not really because I was a full-blown libertarian. I just really didn't want to be confused with Sean Hannity. Like, I'm not a neocon. I thought the conservative brand has been so tarnished by so many of those guys that I just try to distance myself from them. And so a lot of people would hear what I was saying through that sort of lens. That I think there's sort of a misunderstanding generally among conservatives, because a lot of what we were presenting under Reagan, for instance, Reagan was libertarian leaning. He rides, tell me the guy who, anybody remember Goldwater, Barry Goldwater? He rides Goldwater, really into, Goldwater brings libertarianism sort of as a mainstream. Reagan is a moderated version of Goldwater, much better sort of I figure he'll be that Reagan. You can think of Reagan as DeSantis, and Goldwater is Trump is the Goldwater who won an election, right. Basically, very, very difficult. But so when you look at the way conservatives think about it, I think a lot of it is like money is the root of all kinds of evil. And so if you start at, everybody says all evil, but it's all kinds of evil. So it's like pervasive, right? So the Fed is this really pervasive thing that causes all kinds. We've touched on family values, education, military spending. I mean, we can connect this all the way around. It's impossible. That's why money's the root of all kinds of evil. It just is so pervasive in the way that it affects behavior and things like that. But I think there's a vast difference between a country's monetary policy and its internal improvements program. or why it would look at a segment of its country and say, man, those people are really behind. And a lot of it was, even it goes all the way back to the Civil War and Reconstruction thereafter, and punitive punishments for like 12 years under Reconstruction. And, plus the South lost a ton of men during that time period. And so the gene pool's pretty depopulated even during that period. And so I think there's a vast difference between looking at your country, making internal improvements, and making investments in your infrastructure, realizing you got a group of people with huge natural resources who do not know how to take advantage of them, and setting them up so that they'll be good citizens and able to pay taxes and build infrastructure. And then a vast difference between that and creating an organization that's really a private bank that the president appoints heads from, that really doesn't do anything but dispense funds to JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and those guys. And those guys who receive that first money receive an immediate advantage because they have it before that you feel that inflation, and they can direct those funds. They control, tertiary interest rates, not primary, secondary, and tertiary rates. And so it's really set up as a banker's paradise. I mean, it's how they're sort of siphoning value off of everyone. And so that's one of the things that I think we have to be really careful about. Is what we're talking about is I'm not anti-government, and I'm not anti-American government. I'm anti-bureaucracy, I'm anti-waste, and I'm anti setting up incumbency with serious advantages. And that's what's really going on. The unfairness in the system is that if you're an incumbent, whether you're an incumbent like your grandparents, or you're an incumbent in office, or you're an incumbent in banking, or you're an incumbent in tech, Facebook is going to have a serious incumbencies going to have to be overcome. And what has happened is that these people have figured out how to use the power of lobbying to create barriers around their incumbency in order that allow them to control whole swaths of industries outside of the control of the American population, who are supposed to be electing people who do their bidding, but instead elect people who do the bidding of larger incumbent organizations who've amassed the ability to carry out these practices, like even cutting off the president of the United States from his Twitter account. I mean, for crying out loud, you never told me the leader of the free world got wrote off by a tech company with a bird for its symbol. We should have squashed those people and took every penny they had and distributed it to other people. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you take the president of the United States' ability to communicate away, I mean, there's a problem. Even if he's saying wrong things, this is America. It's not the Soviet Union. Who gets a shit like that? So anyway, I'm off topic, but I'm just showing that Twitter has this. Twitter and Facebook, they were first entries into the market. They developed these incumbencies, and then they manipulate the system all the way around. And this may be a good secondary conversation for you to create a podcast about this, because democracy has some downfalls, and we should now be looking at them and saying there's some serious problems with the way the U.S. Constitution and our government is functioning right now. And when we get the chance to do an Article 5 or something, we need to figure out what are the amendments we need to pass to cut these guys off at the knees and give economy back to the people, the actual workers and owners. So.
Well, that's the central core of this program, as far as I'm concerned. I don't. I mean, we could talk about monetary spending, Keynes, and all these different things, but if we're not talking about what is actually the problem in our society and actually diagnosing it, then I'm just wasting my time, which is, I think, is what we're getting to here. And you said something about we're getting to the point where they're building these constituencies. I think that the Republican Party is largely what's the word, on the hook for this too, because we're just sitting here going, cut spending, and we're not giving the whole other picture. Okay, when is it appropriate? When is it appropriate? And that's what's one of the things why I get really frustrated with the Republican Party is nobody on the Republican Party. I remember the Tea Party. That was when I started coming into politics. And it was just cut, anti-Obamacare, all this stuff, everything. We're against everything. I knew who all the villains were. I knew exactly why I could lay them out, and then we got to the point where it's like Trump was saying, we have issues. We got, we got immigration issues. We got trade imbalances with China. I mean, America's got issues. And it was the first time I'd ever heard a Republican say that there's anything wrong with them, you know, with the country, because everybody's like, we fixed racism with the Civil War. Reagan fixed the economy. You know, we just got to go back to cut. You know, it's everything's fixed. There's no room for any positive vision. And Trump actually laid something out, right or wrong, got it done, didn't get it done, doesn't matter. He actually just sort of like, for me, laid the groundwork for, okay, there's an appetite on the Republican side for somebody to actually lay out what the issues are and talk about what the issues are, because there are some huge issues that we've been discussing that, and the constituency, and nobody, we want to go back. It seems like we always want to fight about these things back in the 80s, and you know, whether we should do social spending or not social spending, whatever. And to me, as far as I'm concerned, those are not as pressing issues as tech. How is the fact that Amazon and, you know, and the people that we elected to run our country don't understand half of the things that, you know, are going on in the in you know, what was it? There's a guy who's famous in the Senate for asking Mark Zuckerberg, you know, you're you're in the United States Senate and you're sitting in front of, you know, the largest one of the, you know, most influential tech companies, and you're going to ask him a question. It was something to the effect of, so I have spam in my email folder. How does that get there? You know, like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you ask that? You obviously don't understand the scope of what this technology and the implications, and we're entrusting you to write policy on how that affects our lives, and you don't even understand email. Like, that's a problem to me. That's a huge problem. And the fact that you know, it seems like the Republicans just their default is like, and like, you know, I tried to introduce this. Trump, you know, there was no problem with spending with him, but then as soon as Biden gets there, oh, we're spending too much money, you know. And it's like, if we actually, on the, you know, the more conservative Republican side of the spectrum, don't lay out that, yeah, there's real problems in our economy, there's real problems with our this inflation and how it affects everyday people, and connecting it to tangible things, and then laying out that the solution, you know, is not to just cut spending, because we need our infrastructure is failing largely. We don't have nuclear energy. We're dependent on foreign oil. We don't make microchips in the United States. We have all this dependency on other things. And I think about the comparative advantage a lot lately. It's just been something I've been thinking about. You know, we have all these different brands of ketchup, right? And everybody's like, you know, making all the, you know, in the free market, and then we're making our microchips in China because it's very expensive to make those, and they'll make it for cheaper. So they make it for really cheap, and then we'll make different types of ketchup. So you have all these, you know, 15 different companies that are making 15 different brands of ketchup, and, you know, hats and clothes and all these different things. And that's what we do, because we can sell them. This brand is that, you know, all these things, but our actual oil that we get, our infrastructure, our computer chips, all those things comes from other countries. So we have disadvantaged ourselves. You know, nobody was thinking about our strategic advantage. It was this comparative advantage. And that's fine if you have those things being built in America and we are insulated from foreign, you know, countries, then it's fine. We can trade those other things. You know, we can have, you know, free trade and all these things, but we need to insulate ourselves. And I think the government has a real role in that. And I don't hear any Republicans saying that the government should be spending money on building some of these things, because it takes, you know, I think about, like, okay, there's no competition in cell phones. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a lot here, but there's no competition in cell phones, right? But how am I going to compete, right? I want to start a cell phone company because I want to do better business for my, you know, people that, you know, my clients. So I got to launch a satellite into space. You know, how am I going to do it? I'm going to borrow their satellite systems right now and try to get big enough that eventually I can launch my own. But the monopoly is, you know, these several different companies. I don't know. It seems like we have monopoly problems in the United States. We have imbalance on what we make versus what we need coming from foreign, places, and it's just left us in a real bad spot. And again, the only people I hear talking about this are Democrats, and a lot of their solutions are bonkers, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think both parties are bonkers, because to me, you're touching on like the third rail and what nobody really thinks about. Not with like cell phones and things like that, but if you go back to your trade imbalance discussion that you were pointing out, I mean, that's the deal. That's what we made the deal to do after World War II. Germany was in shambles. Germany is a major manufacturer. We got them to agree to reintroducing a brand new currency and not emitting it, and then we would intentionally, right, throw them some bones and buy some things from them over time. And that's also where we get control of the monetary policies of the world, the fiscal policy, not just of the US, but the fiscal policy of the entire world. And then the global idea was, and this kind of comes out of their view of World War I and World War II. Basically, they looked at like uber nationalist Germany, and they said, man, nation states that are nationalists are a problem. They keep causing these wars, Bismarck in Germany, and then, now you've got Hitler on the backside of that. So the problem is nation states. So then they start trying to really dissolve nation states, but they do it in a really underhanded way. They do it through trade treaties, and they tell you it's free trade, but free trade, like GATT and NAFTA, these are like phone book sized documents, have to be updated all the time. True free trade is like one page. It says no tariffs, on it, and that's it. But what you really had was like a bunch of targeted trade. And Donald Trump unmasked a lot of that stuff too. It's through Donald Trump we learned 180% of tariffs were on dairy goods, going into Canada, for instance, and there was no tariff on the other side. Or Chinese steel was no tariff into the United States, but U.S. steel was tariffed heavily. U.S. cars are tariffed going out. But if you follow the line, right, what America was generally doing, or what the global idea was, is that if we made all these nations dependent on each other, then war would be less likely. And so they set up this very, very intricate sort of like trade alliances between them, which is actually what you're watching sort of come apart on your screen now, and why everything has to be realigned, because it was intentional to denationalize the entire West, and they did it through trade. And so to understand that, most people don't understand, like, it was intentional, like it's an intentional thing. And so now when people start talking about nationalism, which when I was growing up was staple bread and butter in like schools, for instance, Walmart used to have, they may still have it, but they used to run like ads like Made in America, and it was a flag above this product and not above another product. And so this idea you should buy American, but that was when we were like in the throes of trying to stop NAFTA, or trying to stop GATT, or trying to stop these things from happening, because we would understand what they were going to do to us and what they ended up doing to us, or have done to us. But like right now, like the problem is that why does President Biden come to office and kill Keystone? Why does he come to office and end fracking? We think they do it because of environmental reasons, but I just think that's bogus. That's what freshman college students think, right? That's not why they really do those things. Or why they really do those things is because they're trying to maintain this web of trade around the world that they're convinced will bring like a warless utopia into the world. And it's just caused terrible things. And now that you're going to turn away from it, again, we're going to have a whole bunch of supply chain problems, because just like you at your house, you should be able to feed yourself. You shouldn't be over at my house every other day, asking for food. 1 day, 2 days, that's one thing. But if it continues to go on and on and on, I eventually say, hey, John Mark, you have to get a job. You have to learn a skill. You're going to have to feed yourself. You can't be in my house every day. I'm not your dad, right? You got to go pull your own weight. That every individual should be self-sufficient. Every self-contained family should be self-sufficient, not dependent on others. I mean, that's what debt and borrowing is, right? It's shifting dependencies. So we have to gain this understanding of self-reliance again, because it goes all the way up from the individual to the family to the state to the nation. And they've seriously disrupted the idea that people are actually supposed to be responsible for themselves. And they did it intentionally. And that's one of the that's a major problem. The idea that we are not supposed to be oil dependent or oil independent. We're not supposed to be manufacturing independent. We're not supposed to make our own. Because if we allow China to make some semiconductors, we'll give them some money, we'll build their middle class, they'll sell our goods there, we'll sell their goods here. It'll all come out in the wash. That's what Nixon was doing in the 70s. When he made a most trade nation status and brought Chinese goods to the world. And it was advantageous for us too. While we were busy weakening our own money, we couldn't afford our own goods anymore. So we turned to Chinese goods because they were made cheaply and our money could buy more of them, and we couldn't afford our own stuff anymore. So, that's monetary policy in a nutshell, right? When we had good money, we could buy our own goods and produce our own goods. When we had bad money, we had to look around and find Malaysia and China and people who are operating under slave labor so we could keep our like living standards up. That's what Peter Schiff is always talking about. Peter Schiff's always saying one day it's going to shift. China has a middle class and they're not going to need us to sell all their stuff to anymore. And when they turn inward to sell to the middle class, it's going to be deep trouble for us because they won't need our markets. And that we've been trading nothing for something for 20 years. And eventually they're going to start trading their something for something that they already own. And
I definitely want to do a China episode.
Yeah.
Definitely need to do a China episode. Paul, you and Matt, both of you all look like you had something to say. Go ahead. Go for it, Paul.
Oh. Okay. So, yeah, the most favored nation trading status was a dumb idea. Jefferson had said at one point, trade with everyone. And his thinking was the more we trade, the less likely we are to go to war. And I remember Bush re-upping, Bush 42. Was it 42? George H.W. Bush, Reagan's vice president. He re-upped, he re-upped China's most favored trading status, and it's government picking winners and losers in the market, and that's never a good idea. And I do want to touch on Keystone because I agreed with Keystone being shut down, but for none of the reasons that that Biden shut it down. Oil companies have the legal right in the United States to instigate eminent domain property seizures. They don't have to go through local, state, or federal governments. So Keystone, a Canadian company, in at least 2 or 3 instances, acquires land through eminent domain from American property owners, and the government that's supposed to be protecting American property owners' property rights is letting Keystone, a Canadian company, take their property for maybe fair market value, but without their permission, and building their pipeline. To which I want to look at Keystone and goes and say, "Go pound sand, get out. You're not welcome here. If you want to run your oil, if you want to have your pipeline, go and negotiate with property owners for land right use, and you can have your pipeline." I'm all in favor of pipelines. I love oil. I love profit. I'm a small business owner, so profit's a good thing. But to forcefully, but having the backing of the force of government to take your property away for, hopefully the court gives you fair market value for it, probably not. That smacks to me as highly immoral. Now, funny thing is, there's something called Line 3, and that backdoored, and there is another pipeline that's running across the United States. And I haven't had a chance to look in to see if that line has gone through, was built by eminent domain or not. But the more government gets into stuff, the more it breaks it and says, "Hey, look at what we've done. It's good." And for Jeremy's sake, just so you know, I'm so libertarian. I wish the Libertarian Party were actually libertarian.
I know a lot of guys in the libertarian wing of things that feel the exact same way. I'm pretty close to a libertarian. I actually would call myself a natural law libertarian.
Okay.
But I made that title up, so I don't. That's
No,
the only
that's
thing
good.
I can think of.
I like
That's
it.
a good title. I'm what you would call an anarcho-capitalist. I'm that far libertarian.
Hey Matt, you look like you had something to say earlier.
Yeah, no. So there's an analogy that must be made. So there's something called cascade failure. Wow, I looked up and everybody disappeared.
Come on. Yeah, cascade
Anyway.
failure though.
Yeah, cascade failure.
Is that
So
your segment when you come on? Is it cascading failure?
yeah, pretty much. I was like, wow, that was a great illustration. No, cascade failure is when something begins to fail in a small way, and then the efforts made to correct it actually push it further into failure, and it just keeps cascading and getting worse. It happens in biology. It happens in medical situations too. Sometimes when you've got something seriously wrong with your body, it continues to get worse, and what your body is actually doing to try to fight it is making it worse. That's why sometimes people die from fevers. Your fever pushes the temperature way too high, which is trying to fix the problem by making it hostile for foreign viruses. But anyways, I think there's a cascade failure that happened in the Great Depression, and it was probably caused hard to say, by the Fed messing with things. But at the very least, it was definitely caused by unwise spending habits, unbiblical spending habits. That part is for sure. The other part is speculative. I would say it's pretty close to definite. So there was a double failure there, and it caused a cascade failure that couldn't get out. And so Keynes, when he looked at this thing, what he was saying with there is no long term if we don't fix the short term is basically we've got to figure out how to get this out of cascade failure. I don't know for certain whether it worked. A lot of people believed it did. The problem is how to stop it, because once the government starts getting involved in fixing a problem, they're expected to continue to fix the problem. And if anything looks like that problem, it keeps on being expected to fix the problem. So I have frequent headaches. Ibuprofen is about the only thing that'll stop it from turning into a migraine that gets so bad that I end up vomiting. But if I start taking ibuprofen every time I feel some type of a minor headache, then eventually, first of all, it starts taking more and more to be useful. And also, it becomes problematic as you get up to higher doses, and then you could kill your kidneys, theoretically. So the point is that it may be justified to use medicine sometimes. It may be through wrongdoing that the problem was first caused, and sometimes you have to figure out how to get out of the problem. So I don't know that I blame Keynes or Keynes, or however it is, or any of the people who adopted it. I don't know that I blame Roosevelt, and I think that a lot of what was done with putting people to work, probably a good idea. Don't know that I necessarily agree on how it was done. That's actually one of the things I love about It's a Wonderful Life. It's kind of showing that the local community is able to do what needs to be done to get through and to push forward. And that people working together works better than the government anyway. So
that is my entire message. Almost everything outside the church, almost everything outside the church, revolves around that right there, that we have to get back to a local understanding of that. We have to learn to solve these problems together. And I suspect that you're going to start seeing a lot of that kind of thing, oil prices and things like that, and the weakening of our monetary system. The logistics are actually logistics. The problems we're having with logistics and the problems we're having with this kind of stuff now probably will only exacerbate. Right. And as oil goes up, and as it becomes less and less tenable to ship all your carrots from, say, Southern California, all your celery from Southern California, so much of your goods and service, dairy from Southern California. California is a huge producer of vegetables. A lot of people don't even know how much of the vegetables, like 90% of U.S. carrots, are produced in one region, period. The more it becomes untenable to do that kind of thing, you're going to have to turn back local, because there was a time when not only did we think in terms of self-sufficiency in terms of the United States or individually, but we also thought about it in terms of regions and things like that. So like coming back to an understanding of solving local problems. But the problem I have is getting people to see enough on the horizon to consider doing them before they have to.
Right.
Everybody procrastinates till they have to do something. And like I'm wearing a hat right now, I'm giving myself a shameful plug, but National Farmers Market. So I'm actually involved in local food a lot. And most of what I see that is probably one of the most powerful political tools I have, actually. And to promote local small businesses, to help other Christians build small businesses through local food production is kind of like something I'm pretty passionate about, because I think one of the ways, not just for Christians, but just for everybody to like help the other person out, is to buy things from people that you know. And like my wife sells bread, and I used to think, who pays $5 for a loaf of bread? I used to think it was insane that somebody would come buy $5 for sourdough bread at our farmers market. But the truth of the matter is, it's almost $5 in a grocery store right now. And that what they were doing was collecting taxes from us, sloshing it over in Washington, distributing it to a bunch of big ag corporations who are producing cheaper food, but it wasn't really cheaper food. You already paid for it once through taxation, and then it's coming to you and you think at a cheaper price. But that system is not working anymore. Like already you're going to see food prices are already rivaling what could be produced locally. And it probably, the future will be the state of Tennessee, the city of Nashville, big regional, big metropolitan regions having to rethink like how far out are they going to build the suburbs? How much of the arable land around them are they going to destroy before they stop and think, wait a minute, I might not be able to get apples from Washington. I might not be able to get strawberries from California in January anymore. And we have to begin to think about not just self-sufficiency at a national level or at an individual level, carrying our debt, but also self-sufficiency at a more regional level, which should bring us all back into contact with real people again and pull us off social media. So we might actually have, through business, if it's true that trade destroys enmity between other people, how much more would it destroy a lot of what social media has brought in amongst us by just having us do business together again, and having me having to talk to that coffee shop owner, and having me how to talk to that owner of the laundry shop, or the owner of the grocery store. Our concerns become a lot more communal when we think about things in a local scale like that. And then I think some of these failures of the global system, which I do believe will fail because it's based on lies. It cannot succeed because it is a lie. You can't print money, you can't go into debt, you can't do the things we're doing. They're lies. So eventually it comes down. But it would behoove us then to be a little bit more farsighted and start doing what like Czech dissidents did and people did in the Soviet Union, start building local economies, start building local businesses, start building local networks, and start rebuilding, and look away from Washington and start looking to Laverne, Smyrna, Nashville, Murfreesboro, my extended family, my neighbors, and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of these problems eventually will be solved locally. That as much debate as we're going to have, Jerome Powell doesn't care what I think. I'm not going to watch my podcast probably, and even if he does, he's going to laugh over champagne, and check his cryptocurrency account because he's got one, even though he claims to be opposed to him. I mean, that's the way these people are. So getting away from them and looking away, I think is super important for us. Like to come back to what you're saying, Matt, to think about local people and local problems and solving them together as human beings.
Yeah, this is definitely my passion project is talking about these things and really connecting it. And I think that, my general take on everything you got, both of you guys just laid out right now is perfect. And I think that that's the long-term solution, but I mean, you said it's all going to fall because it's based on a lie. And when I zoom out, I think that it's going to fail in a big way. I mean, I think if you think the Great Depression was bad, I mean, look at, I just think what's on the horizon is just going to be cataclysmic, like apocalyptic. And before this thought leaves me is I think I heard that Russia was changing its reserve currency to China's the yen. And, we're going from a unipolar world to a bipolar world. with China over there, because we you know, we have so many tricks in the, you know, thing. We were going to, if we're all connected, that, you know, project, like you were saying earlier with, we were intentionally globalizing so that we would never have, you know, no one would ever go to war. Well, then what happens when somebody goes to war against all odds, against everybody going like, that doesn't make sense to you economically to do this. Well, they did it anyway, you know, and China is able to swoop in there and back them up, you know, and you're going to start seeing a different alliance. And I think that's going to shift. The only thing that, you know, as far as like the, you know, it's based all on a lie. I think currently, fundamentally, that's right. That's not wrong. But I think that there is an element to, the stock market is a graph of rich people's feelings. I heard that somewhere, and I thought that was kind of hilarious and true, you know, in a way, because the price or the equity that you're buying it's unrealized asset. So you know, you can increase these numbers and decrease these numbers. I can, you know, put out a piece of paper, a charter, and saying I'm starting an IPO, and then people give me all this money, you know, and I don't actually get that cash. I just, all of a sudden my bank account jumps up, and then I use those numbers in that bank account to, you know, authorize other transactions, which build something. So the concept of money and fiat currency, while it's very abstract, it can have very real consequences. And I think you see that with China, their autocratic system, that the dictator says, we're going to do numbers on a page, you know, now we're, you know, have more, we're going to do this and that, we're going to shift around, we're going to move everybody in from the villages into the cities, we're going to ramp up production. They built a middle class in like 50 years. Insane. And now they're having Vietnam build their stuff, you know, so that they have their middle class is joining our middle class. You know, they're outsourcing to these other countries, and now they're building these relationships. They have been building this world. They're using all of our model, everything that we've done, and we've criticized, but they're using it to their advantage. And so when you talk about, is this good, is this bad, what's the future, we can't, to a certain extent, it scares me, the concept of backing up from that, you know, because it's like, if you start giving up and you just start nationalizing everything, yeah, that makes us more powerful, but there's that short-term cost. You know, who's going to do that? Is Jeff Bezos going to supply all this stuff? His billions are going to run out like that. You know, like this money, it's not real to the government. That's the only one it's not real to. To you and I, it's real to, but to them, it's not real. So that's where I think on the right, we need to have this conversation about this infrastructure. We need to do something TVA style with building the chip factory, which I think we're doing. Something I think he announced in the State of Union, which was great, but that's like 1/10 of what this country needs to be doing. Right. And in addition to that, we need to be doing, like you said, localizing, you know, localizing a lot of things and building out the region's infrastructure. And when you do those things simultaneously, we're gonna, our balance sheet is gonna go from, what is it, 20 trillion right now? Anybody know?
30 trillion.
30 trillion. Does anybody care? I mean, you know,
30 trillion. That, of course, that's not calculating your unfunded liabilities, which is something like 260 trillion last, I think the number was. I mean, it's like some ungodly number. It's a number. If I say 260 trillion, you don't even have you don't have a point of reference for that. Like if I just say, picture $1 billion, you can't do it, and picture 260 trillion. It's just a word. You might as well just be. You can be saying any word. It doesn't make any difference. And
it doesn't matter. And that's the point. It was like, what are we doing with that? We've been inflating our stock market. We've been making all the rich people's feelings really good by, you know, making but that is actually having such a negative effect, because Blackstones and Zillow and Fidelity and all these people are buying up all our property. I mean, we are destroying our economy by the current way that we're doing it. But to me, in order to critique that and to tear that down, in my estimation, we have to have some sort of compelling case for an alternative. And that's where I want to spend more time, you know, in general, on what kind of alternative that we can do. And to me, it seems like, you know, this investing locally, but also investing nationally in some projects, both of those things simultaneously, and then having an exit game, and I think Matt, you quoted Kynes earlier, he said that this will eventually lead all to death or something to that effect. I'm butchering
in the end, you're all dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Keynes said it, you don't save, in the end, you're all dead.
Yeah. And the idea to me behind that concept is like, you got to have a point to pull out and pull back and to focus on the fundamentals. And eventually you do have to cut spending. You have to cut spending. There's no way to do it. We already discussed that, and I don't disagree with it. But if we let our economy go into a full-blown depression, while China, money doesn't matter to them, because they're, you had this luxury in 2008 to fix the economy, so to speak, and then pull back. But we didn't do any of that. There was no conversation of that. It was just cut spending bad, or we're going to, go into a full-blown depression. We got to spend our way out of this. And then just the most irresponsible people of all time, and I like another quote that I like is like, we don't have, I'm not against elites. It's just our elites suck. Like, the people in charge right now they are awful. We need new and better leadership, leaders that have somewhat of a vision, and I do, credit to a certain extent, Trump for having somewhat of a vision, but at the same time too, it was, in compared to what I think is necessary, it's just, if Biden's a 10th, Trump was 20%, of what needs to be done and the scale. And I think that if there was ever a time to get this message out and rally support around it, I think it's probably somewhere around before the crash.
Yesterday,
yeah.
To me, this is a lot about, I was looking for a book. I've got it here. It's called Christianity and Culture by T.S. Eliot. It's 2 essays, one written in 39, the other written in 46. The first one in 39 is probably the most, I would rank it among the most prescient things I've ever read. Now, I would put it just below The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. But what we're really looking at is a conflict of values. So there was a time where the only value of a thing wasn't the dollar value. So there's a value of other things. And so we used to have a scale by which we weighted separate values against the dollar value, or the dollar value is one of several values. But then somewhere around, I'll just throw a number out there where I think it hit, probably somewhere around 1965, the advent of more video oriented television and things like that, the ability to physically appeal to people like that. We ceased valuing almost anything other than the dollar value of things. So, the importation of Japanese cars was about value. It was about the cheaper version of the car. So everything was related generally to the price or a cost of things. And I think we just have to reevaluate if that's the only value that we should value. The reason I was looking for the book was because T.S. Lewis says that's actually the root. That's actually what differentiates a Christian society from a non-Christian society. Is a non-Christian society is totally materialistic, and it only values material things. And so, but a Christian society has other values that it weights, and that's what we don't recognize, that built sort of like Christian Europe, or we can say Christian America. I don't mean that we were like a theonomy. I just mean that our institutions are like based, generally speaking, on a Christian worldview, so that, but he made the point that the major difference was that materialism controls the non-Christian worldview, the pagan worldview. You'd sacrifice your kids to Molech, right? If you could just get your crops to do good, right? If you could just get your sheep to have more sheep, right? So there was a sense in which the materialist worldview was even present in the Old Testament or among ancient men. And so it's just now shifted the other way. But what we have to bring back to the table are the things that we used to ask, not, what will my shoes cost when it's over? But we would ask, what would happen to Fred's job, who makes the shoes that I'm wearing, right? What would happen to Fred's children who go to the school with my children, And so used to have a guy, and he was like a patriarch in his town, and he owned a business, and he literally would ride that business into the ground before he shipped those jobs overseas. But when we shifted to a materialist worldview, that guy ceased to exist. You don't have patrons of cities or patrons of small towns. you have people who are out to get theirs, and they don't care what Fred makes, and they don't care about Fred's children. And might makes right, dollar is king, and that's the way it goes. And Fred just needs to learn how to code, right?
Yeah.
Learn how to code, Fred. You won't have any problems. And so that's a major problem. We're in a super value dilemma, and we don't have any other values to weigh against the value of the dollar or the value of a price. But that's because we're not really a culture anymore. We're more like an anti-culture that's just bought into a lot of things that are not true. And the things we had are being torn down, but we don't understand how they were built in the first place. So we just keep trying to do the same thing again and again and again. Just make the goods cheaper, just cut the government, or let's fix supply. But there's a whole set of value assessments that are done all across those lines that affect the outcome of all these situations. And money does allow you to sort of simplify it a lot, because it does lay you bare. I think that's why Jesus does most of his parables using money, because money does lay you bare. What do you value? Just give me your checkbook. I'll tell you. I tell everybody that I pastor that. What do you value? What does our church value? What does my family value? Give me your checkbook. A few minutes, and I'll figure it out. It won't be long. So money just reveals what you really believe, or what you really think, or what you really love. So.
Yeah, one thing that and we'll wrap this up here, and I'll give some parting thoughts.
What happened? What happened? Was it Paul?
Yeah, Paul.
I didn't mean to talk too much. By the way, guys,
No.
Edit me out. Edit me out. By the way, if I talk too much.
Nowhere
ever asks me what I think about these things. They don't. I sit around in my room and just talk to myself a lot, but no one asked me what I think. So it's the first time anybody's really said, "Hey, what do you think?"
Yeah, no, I tend to get on these and just like go on for on and on and on and feel horrible and have to bring everybody else in. So, but one thing you said about values in the shift, and I think you threw out 60s. There was two things that I thought about. One is my wife and I just did a reaction video to a thing, and it was talking about racism. And one of the
Slavery.
points that it was talking that it mentioned is, and I think it might have been that video, it might have been a different video, but anyway, I just thought about how the family unit of an average Black family was, the single parent rate was higher than other cultures, but not astronomically high. And there was actually a point before the 60s, 100 years after slavery, 1860s to 1960s, where the African-American family was doing better than white families. And then along came the welfare state, and you had the incentive structure, and then so when sometimes the people talk about like the policies and how that affects and the shift, there was a real big shift. And to tie this back in is the shareholder value. I heard that a lot when I was taking business classes, is the point of a corporation to increase shareholder value. He probably said it 30 times in his class. I heard it in another class, 10 different times. I mean, it's just heard it all over, the place. Is the point of, a business is to increase, or a corporation is to increase shareholder value. And I mean, I got to the point where I like cringed when he said it. And I'm like, this is an awful thought, that the point. And at the time I happened to be working for a corporation. I'm not going to throw it under the bus. I thought it was a pretty good corporation at the time. When I started, I was very happy and gung-ho, I'm here, I'm, got out of the military. I'm in a, corporate, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. But I got so turned off to the whole concept of that. What we're doing here is to increase shareholder value. The people on the board, and they eventually this year sold that corporation to another, merged it with a larger company, and like changed all the management, do all these different things. And it's like all the people, the turnover of the people at the bottom, the way that they reacted to the pandemic, it was clear that the entire purpose of this corporation was shareholder value. And kind of sick to my stomach, watching it, because I had, worked in different places, but I still had friends that worked there, and seeing what's going on, and just, it's a poison. To me, it's a poison.
What about the employees? What about the community?
Yeah. And so if I have one, beef with capitalism, you know, and I wouldn't even call it capitalism, but one beef with our modern society and how we do capitalism currently, you know, is this, you know, this focus on supply side. If the Fed, you know, cuts, I mean, if corporations get tax cuts and, you know, then, yeah, tax breaks, they're going to spend more. It's just like, wait a second, on what? You know, on shareholder value, you know, that kind of ticks me off a lot. And so, yeah, so that's my parting thoughts. I don't like how currently we do a lot of things. And I'm very trying to find a third rail somewhere. I mean, I'm very much on the right. You know, I've explored the left. I can't do it, certain things about it. I'm very solidly on the right, but I'm very much like, I'm looking, you know, you don't criticize your the neighbor's kids, you criticize your kids, right? You know, so I'm constantly looking at the Republican Party and just, you know, just frustrated, completely frustrated with a lot of the things I see and a lot of the way that we talk and some of the inside lingo that we throw around. And you know, and having a, you know, marrying it, you know, an African American woman and seeing a little bit different, you know, how other people look at the world based on the fact that they can't change, you know, their skin color, and some things that just fly right over my head, like just hit me in the head right now, you know, and have over time. And it's just kind of like, you know, wow, you know, and I'm very happy for my experience of, you know, being in the military, seeing things in the federal government and how, you know, bogged down and bureaucratic and awful. I've got some reforms that the military could do and just save $1 trillion, you know, and and working in healthcare, I think that I've got a solution for healthcare that can at least help. And, you know, all these different things that I want to talk about. And these are all different episodes, but China, I think, is a big one. And we touched on that a little bit, but yeah, boy, that was a scatter shot. So
Corporate reform is another huge one. I mean, just closing. I mean, for instance, when someone says that the corporations, you know, exist for the corporations to increase the shareholders, I always think that because I've had a corporation before. I know why I had a corporation, and it wasn't increase shareholders. It was to decrease my liability for the things I was doing. Right. So it's really illegal. It's really a legal fiction. It's a shield that people hide around so that they're not personally held liable, you know, for actions that they do in the business realm. It's got, you know, that whole thing like chartering a boat and sending it over and buying tobacco or whatever it was and bringing it back, where those corporate laws came from. I mean, these corporate laws they're ancient, but to be honest with you, they're not that old. Like these are not things that date back, you know, to the ancients. These are things that really come right out of like the Enlightenment era and the colonial period and things like that. And the idea that some of these the idea, even like I might even challenge the notion that corporations are needed. Corporations are only needed if you have a very complicated tax system. But if you have a very simple, low percentage tax system through which everyone pays, you don't really have, you know, a lot of these legal fictions that we have are created around our tax code. Again, it's another type of, you know, really, and you can think of tax code as an extension of monetary policy too. You know, so like all this stuff is so connected. Like, I don't even know how you have a monetary conversation, like not talk about like global war or, you know, food systems or anything, because it's so pervasive, but it's so also invisible. Most people, it's $1, they get it when they get paid, it goes in their bank, they spend it. That's all they know about it. And in economics in high school, you know, I was never really taught about money. I was taught about personal finances, and I was taught some vague sort of supply demand concepts. But I was not really taught like what money was as a place to store my labor until I was ready to release it, that it was actually a part of myself in some senses, that it's my work, you know, it's what I do. It's a place where I can hold on to it and disperse it the way I want to. And I didn't learn about fungibility of money. I didn't learn about all these concepts that you know, traditionally money had, and that these purposes that it served, and how it's now been bent to like serve some other things that are not necessarily for the purpose of money, derivatives, for instance, or, the corporate pay scales. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can view money in a way it should change us. But I like corporate reform would be a great place for some people to start having podcasts, and like, how can we tie these guys' hands? Because really a lot of the problem we're having right now is the government is like doing some things, but the real enforcers of things right now are private entities. And we don't have a very good system to deal with that, because our fallback has always been, leave it to business. Business will solve it. Business will be free of sort of, they don't care what your politics are. They just want your money. And so if we just let the markets correct it, the market will correct it. Well, not in a politicized market, that is not what happened. And so, I mean, that concept now is, you can throw it up in the air and it's gone. People should stop talking like that, like it's not true, and you can see it. So obviously we're going to have to, we have to look not just at restrictions for our federal government or even our state governments, but we have to look at like restrictions on corporations and what kind of power do they really have? Because some of these guys are exercising a great deal of power, and our courts seem to be unable to grasp how they violate the Constitution, and partially because we've kind of built it so that you have two separate systems that way. And so it's going to be, there's probably going to be some Supreme Court cases even in the next probably 2 to 3 years. I saw one Alex Berenson has against Twitter, and Twitter just got set on fire by the 9th District a few days ago over a case in which they had censored some folks. And when the 9th Circuit, that's the worst court in the whole U.S. If the 9th Circuit sets you on fire, you're probably in trouble.
Yeah.
You're definitely in trouble at the Supreme Court level if they do, because they get like 80% of their cases get overturned. They have a terrible rate. So, yeah, there's just so many things to talk about in regards to this kind of stuff, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Hope I didn't ramble too much.
Yeah, no,
if I ran Paul off, apologize, man.
Yeah, no, we're definitely gonna have to do a part 2 sometime, because there's so many different things. I want to talk about, all these different things that we brought up and go into them a little bit. But do you need to run?
Yeah, I got to go in a sec. I really need to finish my sermon.
Sure, I hear you. All right, we'll jump off, and I'll let Matt give some final
Appreciate
thoughts.
It. Blessings. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Take care. Yeah, no, to what he's saying, the Bible speaks a lot about just weights and measures. It talks about treating the orphans and the widows fairly, not taking land from those who need it to survive, making sure that you provide for the people who are poor in your community, not reaping the edges of your field. These were practical ways that business people,
The year of Jubilee.
Yeah, year of Jubilee. Yeah. These were practical ways that the community could take care of its own. Because there were then, as now, people who, for whatever reason, kind of fall between the cracks. And that's been one of my problems with that I've personally seen, not experienced through my own, but vicariously through others. The problem with the healthcare system is if you have a mental breakdown and you can't work for any length of time, there's a really short period of time which you can really get the health care as far as like the mental health care. Like you go to the hospital and you're near suicidal, and you go into that system, and then you go into almost a rehab, and you're back out. It's wild.
It's
and
like
the amount of money.
3 days or something.
Huh?
It's like 3 days holding or something.
Yeah, but then there's longer term things as well. But even still, the problem is so deep, and trying to figure out an effective solution to the problem itself requires lifestyle changes, and thought process changes. And there's not a system for taking care of that, where there really was before. Before it became everybody depends upon the government. When everybody depended upon the community, you helped each other out. When you were bad off financially, when you're unstable, somebody who knew you would feel comfortable taking you in. Who knows you nowadays? If you're, depressed, who knows you well enough to risk taking you in when you're, nearly suicidal? Like, who do you have that relationship with? There's communities are really so fractured, which comes back to one of the side effects of globalization has been that if you don't get along with people you're next to, don't worry about it. Don't worry about finding out what's true or working through problems, because you can always just hang out with people online, or deal with only the people at your social club. You don't have to deal with people in your community. That's been one of the big downsides of not of having the global market for people who you can connect to, versus having local development of relationships. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I think that and again, this episode has been a long time brewing for me, because I mean, I wanted to go into all these things, but it's just so interconnected. And I'm glad that we have done some episodes on NFTs, cryptocurrencies. We've done some talking about the housing market. We've done some talking about a lot of different subjects that have kind of helped build to this. And I feel like it was time to talk about these things, but I don't think we've even come close to scratching the surface. I mean, there's just too many different rabbit holes that need to be going down in relation to, I mean, they don't all have to be monetary policy part 1, 2, 3. They can be business law, they can be these things. And one of the things that my professor was a judge for business law in school. And basically the class is, and this was my take on it, is how businesses can get around the law. And that was not the intention, but that's what it is. This is bad.
Right.
This is what you don't do. So this is how you get around this lawsuit. This is how you cover yourself from this liability, and it was like corporate business law is about teaching students how to avoid getting in trouble. If you can do it any other way, just don't do it. These are the way that people have gotten caught so far, and it's very, very, and again, and it's like, it's a judge, so he's made rulings on these things. It's just, it blew my mind. But it didn't in the moment, it was one of those things like sitting back and looking at it. And I have a lot of, thoughts that have kind of bubbled to the surface, over these last several months, talking through a lot of these things, because I think back to, my international relations class, and talking about, a unipolar world and a bipolar world, and, the different political systems in other countries and how that works, and how autocracies work, and the oligarchs of, Russia and all these things. And then kind of like fast forward a couple of years, and now seeing like all these things playing out, and it's like, man, this is like ringing so many bells, and I'm seeing the whys, and I'm seeing all these different things. And it's almost like nobody else saw this coming. Like just me, like nobody else saw this coming. And it's like, so it's like looking into the future going like, this is bad, and it's we've already talked about this. So I hate to, continue to ring this gong, but we're in for a reckoning, or it's going to just kick the can down. But eventually there has to be a reckoning, because it is built on fundamental lies. You can't, I just keep going back to the stock market is a graph of rich people's feelings. And when they're not feeling good, we all suffer. When they're feeling great, for a decade of quantitative easy money, low interest rates, then our houses values skyrocket, but everybody's a renter now. And now nobody can afford gas. Their wages haven't gone up because the money and the profits it's a quarterly profit. And then you get a bonus, every quarter as a CEO or the board, if you have high revenue. So it's this short-term thinking. And China always has this like 5-year strategy. Everything is built on a 5-year strategy. So they're like, how can we overtake America in 5 years in this area? Okay. Now, how can we overtake it in 5 years in this area? How can we overtake, it's this constant measuring. And what techniques did they use? Okay. They don't think money's real. And that has allowed them to do this and this and this. And that's how they make all this money and whatever, blah, blah, blah. We can do that a lot more effectively, and this infrastructure that we built around, as Jeremy's talking about how corporations go, but it's so much deeper to me, because it's like the politicians use this language to brainwash. I can't tell you how many poor, like dirt poor Republicans in Tennessee that I know that will talk to me and tell me just straight up just how Biden's bad, all the spending is bad, and and they just know for certain. and we got to cut spending. We got to cut taxes. We got to cut taxes and regulations. And I'm like, do you know what that means? Do you know what that means? You're going to lose your job because the regulation that says that, you have to, pay sick leave, whatever, and you get sick with cancer and you're done. And they don't have to pay you. Like, okay, they're not, that corporation that is using your labor, your time, your energy to make a product for somebody, and you are worthless to them. If you fall over dead, somebody is going to replace you. If you get sick, you're out. Somebody's going to replace you on the line. And right or wrong, that's how it works. That's what I'm saying. And the fact of the matter is, because we're such a globalized society, who is it that gets to tell these companies? The only one that can tell these companies that you have to pay sick leave, that you have to do these things, you have to do right by your employees. We've gotten rid of unions. We've gotten rid of all the unions, basically in the United States, the union membership is like, I think it's ticked back up in the last couple of years, but before that is like historic, low. And so workers' rights and protections are gone. You could be, fired at the drop of the hat. And that makes it a very difficult environment to live and exist. I think that gives a lot of people anxiety. They don't have that security about working their job, that they can do it. They don't take pride in their work. It has a lot of psychological effects on our society is basically what, trying to get to there. And
yeah. Well, but here's the thing. Here's the counterpoint to that. So right now, if you lose your job on the line, there's nothing that you can do because you can't start your own business because it's so heavily regulated that trying to check all those boxes would take all of your time and you wouldn't have any time to actually do anything.
Most people don't want to start a business.
They might if they could own it. That's the thing. Like, nobody realizes the benefit of owning a business because they're so afraid of losing their shirts.
I know exactly what it takes to own a business and run a business, not because I do it, but because I manage a business. And my employer is stressed all the time, gets no sleep, makes a lot of money comparatively to what, a lot of people can make as far as like potential to make, but stress, work, 50, 60 hours a week. And being a business owner is not for everyone. It's not for people who want to raise a family. It's not conducive to raising.
It doesn't have to be
for the most of the
because
time.
Business owners employ people, and that's what I'm trying to say is that if you had enough, if the risk of owning a business as far as regulations were concerned were lower, there would be sufficient, not everybody, but sufficient people who are starting small businesses that could employ people. And that's
if the businesses we had weren't trash. You wouldn't want to. You would just go to work to get that paycheck. And then you'd love your life with your family, with your other, things, with your community, you could. But when you don't have security in your job, I think most people want to work. Most people want to add value. And I think that people that, even though they don't think about it, look, I want to go to work. I think people do go to work and they do get value out of it, or can, if they're thinking about it that way. But our culture, like, most of this is a cultural problem,
right?
I think, and that's really what I'm trying to boil it down to. But I think that in the area, in the way that our world currently exists, there has to be some source, but it also has to be sold from the government. This is why this exists. It's not to punish this business. It's not to overregulate this business. It's to make sure that the people that work for this business have guarantees, have support. And that if the company embraces that and isn't always trying to lobby against these things, then you can have a fantastic business and you can do business well. And instead of having, everything being about increasing shareholder values, stockholder value. Stakeholder value, who's the stakeholders in this? Is the employees are part of the stakeholders.
One of the biggest things that would change things. One of the biggest things that would change things is setting up the parameters. So what are the parameters of rulings that the government should meddle with as far as companies go? What is actually good? And I would say that the primary parameter is this going to affect the health and welfare of people who can't bargain on their own, people who would not be able to bargain effectively with that corporation. Is this, and that would be, unfortunately gets a little bit subjective, but even still, if that were the attitude going in, then I think there would be more buy-in. If it was more of a like, okay, so what is our reasoning for doing this? Instead of creating all types of regulations, so many boxes that you got to check, that if you want to create your own business, you have to worry about getting shut down by the IRS because you didn't file Form 193-42.
Well, here's the problem with part of the problem with the IRS is the IRS has been so gutted because cut government spending. Now, if I want to go after a large corporation, I'm going to need a team of lawyers to, go through their books. I'm going to need all this money to go after this business and to get those things. Well, so I'm just going to leave most of the big businesses alone.
Mm-hmm.
Who can I go after that isn't going to sue me back? Middle class, lower income. Oh, you claim this on your taxes? That ain't right. Boom, hit you with, with the taxes and the regulations. Me with your best shot. Those people, they can't fight back. Who am I going to fight against the IRS? I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely put gas in my car right now, much less afford a lawyer to fight back on a tax bill. So the IRS does more tax enforcement on lower income people than upper and middle class and upper class, because it costs them more to fight. You would think that there would be more money in it to go after those things, and there sure is, but it's not cost effective to do it.
Yeah,
because we've
but that itself
IRS
a form of corruption, because the purpose of the government is to provide just measures for all.
It's not just corruption, it's brainwashing, in my estimation. Okay, it is corruption, okay, but it's also brainwashing that these corporations have these campaigns and pay these mostly Republicans. I'm going to say mostly Republicans to come out and to say all the time, over and over, tax cuts and regulations, cut regulations. It's going to increase, it's going to help the economy, blah, 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 over and over, all these talking points over and over and over. And all of that is just like smoke screen, for cutting the IRS, cutting spending. So like, if I'm going to get, these politicians to do all these cuts spending, okay, go into the government and cut the IRS. Okay. Now they're not coming after me anymore. Yeah. That helps me as a business. And you're right. It's corporation, but it's also cooperation, and it's brainwashing to a certain extent.
But also there's a problem if you cut the enforcement of the law without cutting the number of laws that need to be enforced. But the root of the problem is not that we have too many people working on these rules. The root of the problem is that we have too many rules, so that compliance is nearly impossible. What was it, like the average person breaks the law at least 3 times a day or something like that? It's more drastic than that. But the point of the matter is that people are breaking the laws all the time. They don't realize it. Especially small businesses are constantly breaking the law because they can't possibly be aware of all the laws because there's so many of them. And that is a significant problem. If we could cut that, then the IRS that we have would be more than sufficient, and we could actually cut some of the IRS, which sounds terrible for the people who are working at the IRS. However, we also are in the middle of a serious supply shortage for jobs. So jobs right now, there's too many jobs and not enough people to do them. And it's going to take a while for the market to adjust. But that's one really simple solution would be to really super simplify the tax laws, get rid of a lot of the weird trade things that he was talking about, with like 100 and whatever percent tariffs. It's like, what? So get rid of all the junk, so that companies can actually comply, and then you'll actually see it possible for new startups to actually compete in that market. And that's what I'm talking about, that could undo a lot of this damage. But it's going to be, if we started today, if America were completely sold on the solution that I said, instead of distracted by arguing about things that are not actually effective, if as far as money goes, because there are important arguments that are being had right now. So I'm not saying everything we're arguing about in America is wrong.
Fair enough.
But I'm saying, like, let's just say that we all agreed on monetary policies by some miracle, and we started today. 20 years from now, we might have an actual spending decrease to the right level, which is why a lot of people are projecting that we literally can't pull out of this. Like I said, cascade failure. We're in a cascade failure going the other direction. We're addicted to medicine, and trying to get off that addiction is going to be super painful. And America does not have the will to do that. And if we did, huh?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, but you know, go back to sort of my thing is, I mean, like, instead of using ibuprofen, like, you know, you need a steroid shot right there, and then you need to completely cut out the ibuprofen. You know, like fix the immediate. You know, we are already going in crippling headache, and you're throwing up. Do something immediate, and then wean yourself off of the ibuprofen. You know, and so, but you got to do the right precision things, and one of the things that I strongly advocate for is not letting politicians tell us, oh yeah, I like what he's saying, that sounds good. Is no, this is what I expect. I expect responsible corporations to be responsible, you know, members of our society, to do right by people. I expect XYZ. I expect us to start building things here, and I'm okay with certain spending on these types of things. These are the spendings that I'm okay with. These are the spendings that you need to do. And these are the spendings that I'm not okay with. I'm not okay with the Fed just putting all this money into these central banks and then them sitting on it. I mean, like we were said, there's so much money sitting in these banks right now in just vaults that they're not doing anything with it, you know? And to put it into the economy would just inflate everything. Like, we already have this inflation. So now it's like you have too much money, and I can't invest in these companies. But the other thing too is, like, there's so much entrenched bureaucracy within corporations that are not incentivized to change, right? Facebook does not have any innovation right now. Facebook primarily, and a lot of these startups, these Silicon Valleys, I mean, so many Silicon Valley startups right now, the point is to make an app that challenges Facebook so that Facebook buys you.
Yeah.
That's innovation. That's Silicon Valley. That's our brightest and smartest people right now, is making apps that can be bought so that you make a bunch of money. Like that's the trash that I'm talking about. And so when a company is looking at, oh, should I invest in that new startup business? Yes. Okay. I put a bunch of money in there. Okay. Boom. He got bought by Facebook, got a huge return. I made a huge return on my investment. Yay. But what was the net? You didn't have any innovation in the society. So the problem, not just with the Fed and with the bank and that they're sitting on all this cash, the problem is our society does not incentivize innovation, because nobody in a business is going to challenge their own business. I do not want to see that startup succeed. I do not want to see this business succeed. I don't really want this small business to challenge anything right now. That is a huge problem, and cutting my taxes only helps me, and putting more money into the stimulating the trickle down of economics, you know, whatever, only helps me go buy more facilities in China or Mexico or Vietnam or wherever I want to now, you know. So yeah, well, I think we're going to wrap up like probably 30 minutes ago. So I'm going to let you have some parting thoughts. You can make them brief or as long as you want. This is the Johnny Random Show, so take us out.
So, you know, the old Superman thing was that he stood for truth, justice, and the American way. But the reason that he did was because the truth and justice were the American way, as a rule. And until truth and justice are again the American way, the solutions that we have are going to be pretty superficial. We're not going to get that massive steroid shot that we need from your previous analogy. So I would say this is that Christians can lead by example as far as being appreciative of the local community, the local church, being active in our local church and our local community, caring for our neighbors in times of difficulty, because we are seeing massive inflation right now, with gas and the price of everything going up. There's nothing else that you could possibly call that other than inflation. I fully expect we're going to see 20% this year. I don't think that that's going to be the number that we see, but we're going to see 20% this year, because there's ways to mess with it. But again, effectively, people's buying power of their money, they're going to see it go down by roughly 20%. It's going to hurt. So how we behave towards each other, how we invest in each other is going to be the big turning point difference. I don't think that we're going to be able to get the unity with the Republicans and the Democrats going at each other to be able to change the monetary policy. In a perfect world, we'd be able to set this straight, and it would be a couple of painful years. But as it is, we're delaying that pain as much as we can. And I think we're beginning to wear off on, how much we can delay that pain. But the fact of the matter is that we can take care of each other. We can truly love each other, which is also entails telling each other hard things that we don't want to hear. So that's all I have to say on that.
Well, thanks. This has been a long episode, much longer than I anticipated, and I appreciate you joining us. And to sum it all up, get informed and elect better people. And no, that's not a summation at all. That's just my last little thought I want to shoot out there into the world. But thank you so much for this, for joining us, all the guests here and that have passed away, not physically, but logged out.
It's like, okay,
I'm tired. I need to go to bed. We'll see y'all in the next episode.